Buddy. With a few more people pop in here. So great to see people. Thank you so much for coming. It's a beautiful day in Northern California. Hopefully it's not raining where you are. We'll take the sun. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. So once again, thank you everybody for coming to the Parkinson Association's first official webinar. We're super excited to start this program and for Parkinson's Awareness Month. So thank you all for coming. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. Oops, golly. All right. Couple housekeeping issues. We have the four, oh my gosh, I haven't done this in a while. The four webinars in the series are, there we go. The next one's the nutrition tips for Parkinson's. Then we have the fundamentals of joyful exercise. And then the last session is wellness within the context of illness. So we're super excited about these four series, 1 o'clock on every Thursday, and we will send you the recording after the session is over. Just a couple things, the calendar of events. This month, the Archival Gallery in Sacramento is doing an art exhibit with the Parkinson's exhibition from April 6th to the 29th. Fabulous exhibit, so go ahead and pop by if you can. Big Day of Giving is our big donation day on May 4th. And just a reminder to put our September 30th on your calendar for the annual education conference. It'll be in Roseville. Just a couple of housekeeping issues. We can't hear you. You're on mute. We can't see you or can't hear you. If you'd like to ask a question, just click on the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen and ask a question, and Kimberly will answer it at the end of the session. And once again, the recordings of the sessions will be sent to you after the fourth in the series. So we'll send you all the recordings and any slides that we have, and you can have them then. I'm going to introduce you to our speakers very quickly. Dr. Khandhar is a movement disorder neurologist and chief of neurology for Kaiser Permanente in North Valley, and the medical director for the KPNC Comprehensive Movement Disorders Program. He's also an associate clinical professor at the California North State University College of Medicine. His work in the Parkinson's disease began with a clinical fellowship in PD and movement disorders at the San Francisco VA Medical Center, and he received his MD degree from St. George's University in Grenada, West Indies. Pretty cool. I didn't know that. And Kimberly Carson serves as a mindfulness teacher and yoga therapist at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland, Oregon, and for the Brian Grant Foundation. She specializes in the therapeutic use and scientific study of mindfulness and yoga for people with medical challenges with expertise in pain and cancer. And I'm so excited to hear Kimberly's discussion today. So I'm going to stop my share and introduce Dr. Khandhar. Go ahead, Dr. Khandhar.
There we go. Thank you so much, Jan, for that lovely introduction. First of all, I have to thank the Parkinson Association of Northern California for really putting this series together. I think it's very appropriate and timely, given the fact that this is Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month. I'm not sure if everyone on the call is aware, but the United States Congress appointed this particular month as Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, really in honor of Dr. James Parkinson, who first described the condition back in 1817, 206 years ago, publishing his original manuscript, The Shaking Palsy, in a publication called The Lancet. Actually, April 11th, which I believe is next Tuesday, is World Parkinson Day. And the reason why we call it World Parkinson Day on that particular day of the month is because it happens to be Dr. James Parkinson's birthday. So in the spirit of, Parkinson's Disease Awareness Month, it makes perfect sense for us to go ahead and do some educational webinars and seminars on Parkinson's disease and share that with the community. As a movement disorder specialist myself, I feel that successful treatment, and I have mentioned this not only to the Parkinson Association here locally, but also to the National Parkinson Foundation, that a successful treatment really revolves around three major things. One is making sure that somebody has the right diagnosis and optimizes the right medical management for that individual. All too often in the medical setting, we focus so much attention on medications that we sometimes deflate our focus on other things. And I really want to make everyone on this call aware that medication is just one part of what we do from a treatment perspective, and really 1/3. The second 1/3 revolves around therapy and therapy services. So physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, and making sure that you develop the right core care team when it comes to those therapy approaches. The third, and just as important as the other two, are going to be personal empowerment, ownership, understanding yourself and how it relates to your condition, and really melding all that together. But there's one piece that I've often forgotten, and I know that Kimberly is going to remind me today, as to wellness and mindfulness, which should permeate all three of these things. I don't think you can have optimization of medical management without wellness. I don't think you can have therapy services that are successful without wellness. And I certainly don't think that you can empower yourself with learning as much as you can about Parkinson's and taking the right step forward, again, without wellness. And I'm not just talking about motor wellness, I'm talking about personal mental wellness as well. And I think that the whole concept of wellness in the setting of Parkinson's disease has probably evolved quite a bit, particularly in the last 3 years during this pandemic, when so many of us were isolated and really requiring that social integration in order to feel confident, to feel like ourselves again. So that said, don't want to take any time away from Kimberly Carson, but I thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly. You and I both share our love for the Brian Grant Foundation and certainly for the community that we serve up in Portland or me in Sacramento. But I'm going to go ahead and shift the mic over to you so you can share with everyone on this call, myself included, a little bit about what you've learned and what you teach.
Wonderful. Thank you, Suketu. It's so nice to be here. And thank you, Jan, for the invitation. It's a very inspired service community that invites mindfulness training into the Parkinson's toolkit. There's what I've discovered in working with folks navigating Parkinson's disease is that there is a radical sincerity in self-care. Like what I see is people are doing so much to take care of themselves, about finding, as Suketu was saying, the right physician, the right team, the right medicines, the right rhythms of medicine, the right self-care, right? The, PT, the OT, the exercise, the community support. And there's within that collaboration of efforts to maintain wellness throughout this journey. One of the pieces that I'm seeing folks really describe is that being able to have practices that really support the simplicity of being is this really important aspect that sometimes can get overlooked, again, in these really sincere efforts to do all the things that are available to try to navigate Parkinson's with grace and dignity. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to share a couple of slides. I do have a little bit of a geeky background. I've been doing research trials with mindfulness in various populations for several decades now. So I'll have a little bit of that geekiness here in this presentation. But what I know from having worked with these practices and teaching these practices for so long is that it's really in the application and it's in your experience with these practices where you're going to begin to get a sense of what this really is and how it might serve you. Okay, so let me pull up this set of slides. All right, so here we go. Go ahead and there it goes. All right, so finding balance breath by breath. So mindfulness for navigating Parkinson's disease. So we've really been in our culture for a couple of decades now, really been in what's sometimes referred to as the mindful revolution. And we see it being used in a lot of different settings, in particular in healthcare, but other institutional settings as well. And a lot of this mindfulness revolution was first started by a fellow named John Kabat-Zinn, who was at the University of Massachusetts at Worcester. And in '79, he first presented this 8-week protocol, which is really kind of the gold standard of mindfulness training in our contemporary society, and also has become one of the #1 studied mind-body interventions at the National Institutes of Health. And then we've also had another application that's been really helpful in the therapeutic community of mindfulness tools. And this was developed by Stephen Hayes, in the 90s, and this is referred to as acceptance and commitment therapy. So it's been a really interesting kind of integration of these practices that have been around for a really long time, and looking at how they best support us in our modern day and time with the different challenges that we're navigating, medically as well as psychologically. I love this slide. And it says, I want to learn to live in the moment, but not this moment. I prefer some other moment, like a moment on the beach or on the mountain or by the river, whatever it might be. And so we kind of have this collective understanding that mindfulness practices really help us to live in the moment. To be here now is a phrase that's often used. But what happens when this moment is really uncomfortable? What if this moment is really scary? What if this moment is really shaky? And then, of course, it's in these moments where the last thing we want to do is be present with what is here. So then it becomes a delicate integration of what we're doing with mindfulness practices. And the first thing I'd like to introduce here is that mindfulness is actually completely natural. And in fact, I would even argue that it is your birthright, that we all come in with this capacity to be present. So the definition that's generally used is mindfulness is a moment-to-moment awareness of what is present in an open and non-judgmental way. Okay, so let me say that again. Mindfulness is a moment-to-moment awareness of what is present in an open and non-judgmental way. Well, it sounds kind of simple, but we find that when we actually try to do it, it seems really complicated, especially when things are tough. But going back to this notion that it's completely natural, that it's actually our birthright, if you've ever had the privilege of looking into the eyes of a newborn, and that might be a newborn baby or a newborn baby pup or a newborn baby kitten or a bird or whatever creature you've had the privilege of witnessing in their early days, what you'll see in their eyes is just this open, non-judgmental awareness, right? It's literally what we come in with. And so in a lot of ways, what the mindfulness practices are doing is helping us connect to what we already know. Okay? Connect with what we already know. And in this connection, right, back to this open, non-judgmental moment-to-moment awareness, what we'll begin to recognize are all of the different layers of our lives' experiences, including our conditioned experiences, that kind of create a little bit of a sense of disconnect from being in the moment. So there are strategies that we use with mindfulness practices that really help us focus our attention in particular ways. And in general, you could understand meditation practices to be skillful use of our attention. So in a lot of ways, our attention is probably one of our greatest assets. And how we use it sometimes kind of goes unnoticed. So with meditation, mindfulness meditation practices, we're specifically training how we use our attention. So, we have this idea, a lot of us, that, oh, if I could just get my Zen on, I've heard people use that phrase, if I could just be in the moment, if I could just have a meditation practice, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to be really present and things are going to calm down. And then what happens? We sit down into meditation practice and there is this complete and utter storm of thoughts, of feelings, of sensations. And it seems like anything but calm, right? Anything but calm. So here is where we begin to look at, well, how is it that we're using our attention when we're engaging mindfulness practices? And so what I'd like to do here is just for a few moments, give you a little taste of one of our basic practices. And for this practice, for this little meditation, I'd like you to be as comfortable in the body as you can. And I know that that's not always possible. So that can change from moment to moment. So no worries if there's movement involved, no worries if you need to wiggle and shift for the body to find a little more ease, but just do your best to let your body be comfortable. And then if you're okay closing your eyes, I'd invite you to close your eyes. If you prefer to have your eyes open, that's okay too. And we'll begin by simply noticing what is present. And this, of course, might very well include sensation of any nature or intensity. We might notice feelings, kind of the emotional currents of the heart. Some gentle, some intense. We might notice any number of ways that the mind is structuring, any different number of thought patterns. So it might be remembering, it might be imagery, it might be commenting on the experience. So whatever's here for now, just notice. And as a gesture of kindness, we're going to, for now, just let it be. Now, see if you can feel in your own experience where the breath is most clear. So for some of us, we'll feel the breath most clearly in the nostrils. For some of us, it might be further down in the throat or deeper in the torso. But wherever you feel your breath the most clearly, for the next little while, let your attention relax here. In the natural rise and fall of breath. Feeling the inhalation and feeling the exhalation. For a few moments, we're just going to let things be simple. Feeling the in-breath and feeling the out-breath. Now, don't be surprised if attention trots off in a different direction. It's probably going to quite often go to thinking or maybe a different sensation. Just what happens, so simply notice. Open, non-judgmental awareness, just notice. And then with the gentleness with which you might take the hand of a small child, just gently reorient attention back to the feeling of the natural breath. Okay, so as you're ready, you can open your eyes and reorient back to the screen. So I suspect in that few moments of breath awareness practice, mindful breathing practice, if you're like most of us, there was at least a moment where your attention was focused on the breath, the feeling of the breath. And then there were probably a lot of moments where attention was off doing something else. And again, that's totally natural. Now, here's the thing. If you were able to notice that, if you could see that happening, attention orienting away from your intended focus, then that's actually an important moment of mindfulness, of being aware of what is here. So with these practices, it's not that we're trying to hold our attention really steady, okay? In fact, neurologically, attention has like a wave-like function. So it's gonna build, it's gonna peak, it's gonna fade. It's totally natural. So we're not trying to create some rigid focus with our attention. Rather, what we're trying to do is just become aware of where attention moves, and then just gently bring it back. So every time attention is brought back to the breath, it's just like lifting a weight. So if you do like bicep curls with those hand weights, every time you flex that muscle, it gets a little stronger. So likewise, every time we refocus attention, that neural pathway gets a little stronger. Okay? I love it when people begin to understand that, because it takes a lot of the pressure off. Okay? So many people that I've worked with over the years, what I'll hear from them is like, oh, I can't meditate because I sit down and I'm just so distracted. And my number one response to that is, well, welcome to humanity. That is what happens for so many of us. So let's take a few moments now and just look at the mindfulness research and kind of what the scientific community is discovering, both about mindfulness in general and then mindfulness for those living with Parkinson's disease in particular. So since the mid-90s, there's really been a swelling tide of research indicating that mindfulness training can have significant impacts on the reduction of pain, on the reduction of blood pressure, stress hormones, anxiety, and depression, as well as an increase in immune and neurologic function. Okay, so these are some of the kind of global changes that we see. And because we're seeing these outcomes consistently reported, mindfulness has really become a helpful adjunctive treatment for a lot of different struggles that we work with. Here is a little chart of randomized controlled trials, which are demonstrating significant changes in specific outcomes in various populations. So I just thought I'd offer this. You can kind of see that it does kind of cross the board. So we see improvements in chronic pain and stress levels, improvements in asthma and diabetes management, improvements in substance abuse, cortisol levels, the ability to relax, how much satisfaction we find in our relationships, improvements in eating disorders and insomnia. So it really is quite varied, the ways in which mindfulness has been shown in clinical trials to help folks, which is really, really impactful. Now, if we look more specifically at mindfulness interventions, research interventions with folks that have Parkinson's disease, we're really early in this research effort. But I did want to bring forward a couple of trials that have decent research integrity, but not top shelf, not just yet. So one of them was published in 2016, and this was a pilot study of a mindfulness-based intervention. And what they saw in this 8-week mindfulness training, which again is that mindfulness-based stress reduction I mentioned earlier, significant improvements were seen in mindfulness levels, in symptoms of depression and language functioning, improvement in mental flexibility and complex attention to tasks, as well as some emotional and cognitive symptoms associated specifically with Parkinson's disease. Now, what was really interesting in this study is that there was an indication that homework compliance was correlated with improvements not only in mindfulness, but in apathy and anxiety, in working memory, as well as mental flexibility. And I wanted to highlight this finding because one of the things that we know in the mindfulness community and therapeutic community is that we get good at what we practice. Okay, so the more that we do these practices and integrate these tools into our daily self-care, then the more our systems benefit. Okay, and this is what we're seeing here in this trial. Now, if we were to take a step back and look at what are the changes in brain structures that occur when folks engage this structured mindfulness-based stress reduction program, And this is in a group of healthy subjects who don't have any specific medical condition just yet. It's true for most of us. And what we see are changes in these various areas of the brain. And if we look at what does this actually mean in terms of our function, so all of these different regions of the brain indicate improvements in how well we can regulate attention, in our body awareness, in our perspective taking capacity, in empathy and compassion, learning, cognition, and memory, and emotion regulation. And this one is really important. Our ability to calm fear is a significant benefit that can come with this systematic mindfulness training. So then if we look a little bit more closely, just one more geeky slide, if we look a little bit more closely at a research trial that was looking at improvements through the use of this mindfulness-based intervention, mindfulness-based stress reduction, and we look at fMRI findings, so in other words, images of the brain. What we saw in this randomized controlled trial is that there were 3 areas that had significant changes in gray matter density. And these gray matter density changes were related to areas of interest in the Parkinson's process. So areas that are sites for pharmacologic interventions with the dopaminergic agents, we're seeing changes where they've seen decreases in this gray matter density. And then also changes where there are areas in the brain that seem to be active in compensatory function, especially when some of the motor patterns begin to shift. So again, this is early data. This was a team out of Belgium, but at least we're getting some encouraging data that these practices might have even specific impacts for those that are navigating the Parkinson's journey. So what I'd like to do now is I'd like to just spend a little bit of time with some specific practices. Okay, so that was a lot of heady explanation about why these practices can be helpful. So let me give you a little bit more of a sense of what these practices are. And we're going to cover these that I've got listed here. Okay, so we've already done this breath awareness that I've got listed here in the center of the page. Refining awareness of when and how stress gets activated with the breath awareness practice. We're going to do a little 3-part breath practice that can really help kind of reset when the breath patterns become dysregulated, especially in moments of high agitation or arousal. And then I'm also going to talk just a little bit about one of the kind of the feeling tone practices, if you will, of mindfulness. And this is loving kindness. And to be honest, in some ways, this practice has been really, really one of the most important practices. Navigating a chronic disease, as I am sure you all are quite aware, is really tough. And finding patience and kindness towards ourselves and towards our bodies when they're not working as we would prefer requires a kind of an intentional practice. So we'll spend just a few minutes with that loving kindness as well. And so let's start with the 3-part breath. Okay, so again, let your body just be as comfortable as it can be. And you need to shift how you're sitting, feel free. And again, eyes opened or closed, whatever you prefer. Notice what is here. Notice what sensations are present. Notice what feelings might be arising. See if you can notice the activity of the thinking mind. What's it up to? And as a gesture of kindness, for now, let's just let this be. And again, feel into your breath. And for a few moments, just feel the natural rise and fall of the in-breath and the out-breath. And now, if you can, let one hand come and rest on your chest and one hand rest on your belly. If you find that this is a moment in which tremors are pretty activated and that feels more challenging to do, you could just let your hands stay in your lap or wherever it's most comfortable. What I'd like you to do is to see if you can sense your belly. And see if you can feel any movement in the low belly that's related to the flow of breath. Now, when you breathe in, see if you can let your belly soften just a bit. Like you unzip pants that got a little snug over Thanksgiving. And then as you breathe out, just let your belly sink back towards your spine. As the breath moves in, see if you can let your belly soften a little bit. And as you breathe out, it's just going to sink gently towards the center. Now, this time when you breathe in, can you let your belly soften and then let your ribs expand to the left, to the right? As you breathe out, can you let this go? As you breathe in, let your belly soften, let your ribs get wide to the left and to the right. As you breathe out, let this go. Now, as you breathe in, can you let your belly soften, let your ribs expand, and then let your chest get a little broader. Breathing out, letting all of this empty. Breath moves in, let your belly soften, your ribs expand, your chest broaden. As you breathe out, let the breath empty itself out. And just one more time, breathing in, belly, ribs, chest expanding. Doesn't have to be dramatic. And then as you breathe out, just let all of this go. Now, if you did have your hands resting on your torso, go ahead and let them return to your lap or wherever you like. And for a moment, just be curious. What do you notice in the breath? What do you sense? What do you feel? Okay, so that 3-part breath practice, again, can be a nice reset when the system is really feeling agitated, when it's in one of the down periods, off periods. It's not meant to be a practice that we use all the time, but it can be a nice reset. So when we did the breath awareness earlier in our session, we were just being present with the natural flow of breath. We were just feeling the natural inhalation and the natural exhalation. Now, why would this practice be important? Well, it has a couple of superpowers, I would say. And one of them is that when we turn attention to the breath, that very often there can be a corresponding quieting in the nervous system. And again, it may not be dramatic, but it's often notable. The other aspect of focusing attention on the natural breath is that we're practicing letting our attention shift from thoughts about experience to the direct experience itself. Thoughts about experience to the direct experience itself. Okay. So here's a little example. Play a little game with me, if you will. So if you were to feel your in-breath and feel your out-breath, do that for a moment or so. Okay, so that's the direct experience of the breath. Now, for a few moments, think about the breath. Okay, so you might think about the lungs, you might think about how it moves oxygen through the system. You might think about the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. You might think about the breath gets blocked during the pollen season. Right? So there's a lot of thoughts you could have about breath. Okay, so that's kind of a different TV station, a different channel. Now, if you come back to feeling the breath, to sensing the breath, you're back in direct relationship. Okay. So part of this mindfulness practice, the therapy that happens, is that when we let our attention begin to rest purely in the sensory experiences of life, different from the thoughts about experience, then there again is very often a quieting that happens. Okay? You might have noticed there are times when the mind gets really scattered. There are times when the mind can be really focused in the past or really focused on the future, anticipating what might happen. And you might also notice that when those things occur, that often it feels more unsettled. So if we can shift our attention back into the direct experience, like the breath or sensations, then there begins to be a little bit more support for the system, okay? So for the next little bit, what I'd like to do is I'd like to walk us through another practice that is going to continue with this training of letting our attention shift into the direct experience, into the sensory aspect of life. Okay? So this practice is called a body scan. And one of the things that I've seen in so many folks that are navigating Parkinson's, as well as other types of life-altering medical challenge, is that sometimes being present in the body is the last thing you'd want to do, right? It's not comfortable, it's not steady, it's not behaving like you would like. And the body sometimes begins to feel like this kind of an off limits place. So as we go through body scan, one of the things that we're cultivating is a sense of kindness towards the body. Sense of kindness. So I'll walk us through this. This will be about a 7 or 8 minute practice. And depending on where you are, if you can stretch out on your sofa or your bed, rest back in your chair, I'd like for your muscles to not have to hold yourself up. Okay, so give yourself an opportunity to be fully supported by whatever furniture you have access to. Wiggle around a bit so you're as comfortable as possible for now. And for this practice, it tends to be a little easier with eyes closed. But if eyes open feels important, more comfortable, please do that. And again, just a couple of moments of feeling the natural breath. And now, best you can, become aware of the toes. Sensing, feeling into the toes. and into the soles of the feet. If there are sensations in the soles of the feet, notice their qualities. So it might be a tingling, a heat, tightness, a sharpness, a moisture, a vibration. Whatever qualities are here, simply sense the quality. And if sensations are not present, then just notice stillness. Sensing into the tops of the feet and into the ankles. Present now in the lower legs, sensing into the shins in the front, the calves in the back. Extending this kind curiosity now into the knees, the backs of the knees, the fronts of the knees, the outer and the inner knees. And become aware now of the upper legs. So sensing through the thighs, the thigh bones into the hamstrings in the back. Now, if attention heads off towards thoughts about the experience or thoughts about something else, or if attention heads off to images about the body, that's a different channel. What would it be like to come back and just sense the hamstrings directly? Feel in directly best you can. Now we're going to open up the lens of attention. This is kind of like going from a spotlight to a floodlight. Now see if you can sense the entirety of the legs and feet all at once. Now, as we breathe in, it's as if we could fill up this part of the body with breath. Now, as we breathe out, we'll just let it be. Now, sense the very base of the pelvis, the pelvic floor. Present in the buttocks and the hips. Extending this kind curiosity now into the low belly. And through to the low back. Sensing into the mid back and the upper back. Present with sensations when they're here. Present with stillness when they're not. Now sensing into the inner spaces of the torso, bones, flesh, organs. And again, not needing to engage the imagery, but just explore the inner region of the torso, feeling in directly. Now become aware of the tips of your fingers, the shafts of your fingers, and the palms of the hands. Sensing what aliveness feels like in the palms of the hands, the backs of the hands. And with this open, non-judgmental awareness, sensing into the wrists and the forearms. Like checking in on a dear friend. How are you? As we sense the elbows, the upper arms. Sensing the shoulders, the various aspects of the shoulders, the fronts, up top, behind, underneath. Sensing now through the throat, into the hinge of the jaw. Curious about the root of your tongue, feeling into the root of the tongue and the roof of the mouth. Exploring through the sinuses, sensing the nostrils. Now, best you can, sense into the very backs of your eyes where the eyeballs rest in the eye sockets. And extending now this kind curiosity into the inside of the back of the skull. And the inside of the crown of the head. Now, for a moment, we're going to see what it would be like to sense the body as a whole, an integrated experience, all at once. So best you can, sense the head and the neck, the shoulders, the arms, the hands, the torso, the pelvis, the legs, the feet. And as we breathe in, it's kind of like we could fill up all the inner spaces of the body with breath. And as we breathe out, we'll just let it be. So as you're ready, no rush, with your eyes open. If you reclined, you can sit back up if you like. So that's the body scan practice. And as Jan said earlier, one of the communities that I've had the honor of working with for a good number of years now are folks that live with persistent pain. And so when I introduce body scan, very often the question is, well, why would I want to be in this body that hurts so bad? And I've also heard from folks navigating Parkinson's, why would I want to be present in a body that's dysregulated in these ways? And it's a difficult question. It's a difficult question. What a lot of people report is that with these practices of being present in the body in this kind and receptive way, that there can be a quieting of this kind of blocking out of our experience. And in that, very often there's a little sense of release and often a sense of relief. So this last practice, I'm not going to go through the whole thing because the clock keeps doing its dance. But this practice of loving kindness, of really recognizing that there is great potential in extending kindness and love, both to ourselves as well as to others. And sometimes it's easier to work with others than it is ourselves, especially when the system is struggling. But there are measurable physiologic benefits to practicing loving kindness, which is a particular form of meditation. One of our early research trials when we were at Duke Medical Center, which is on the East Coast, was using a loving kindness intervention for folks who had been navigating chronic low back pain for an average of 12 to 15 years. And we just taught this meditation practice of shifting the emotional internal climate, if you will, towards one of love and kindness. And simply doing that over an 8-week period resulted in folks having a significant reduction in their low back pain. So there actually are measurable impacts of extending kindness to the body. And that can be done in a formal way. It can be done in an informal way. And sometimes it's really helpful to be practicing both the kindness as well as these awareness practices. So that is, that's my little talk for today. We could spend days, weeks, months, a lifetime exploring these practices. But I want to leave a couple of minutes just to see if there are any questions or comments. I'd love to hear what practice was like for you, what you noticed, challenges that may have arisen. We'll just open the field. So feel free to type in the chat any questions that you might have.
Really, if folks are interested in learning more about the mindfulness practices, and I don't know what is in folks' specific area, but the Brian Grant Foundation does do weekly classes. So could you tell us a little bit about those?
Oh my gosh, I would love to say something about that, Jan.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. So we do offer, Brian Grant sponsors a weekly drop-in class that's free of charge for folks navigating Parkinson's. And that is, you can go to their website and just sign up with Eventbrite and they'll give you the link. It's, of course, an online class. And each week for about an hour, we have a little bit of a contemplation question that everybody responds to. And so we have this really amazing dynamic that begins to take shape in the community. So a lot of sharing and connection. And then what we'll do is then orient those reflections back to a meditation, a mindfulness practice. We usually have between 10 and 20 plus that are on that call. And folks sometimes from all over the world, which is really amazing, certainly all over the country. So if that is of interest, if you'd like to be part of a mindfulness practice community with others that are navigating Parkinson's, please feel free to join us. And again, just check in with the Brian Grant Foundation. Let's see. And Madeline says, I found it hard to be patient. Does this go away with practice? Yes, it does go away with practice. But what I would invite you to do, Madeline, if you're game, if you were practicing something like the body scan, and you can, there's all kinds of apps online or YouTubes. I mean, there's all kinds of resources. But if you were practicing this at home by yourself and you feel that impatience come up, right? Like for that moment, let that feeling of impatience be your object of meditation. So in other words, what you do is rather than try to make the impatience go away, is that you welcome it in and you see if you can sense where you feel it in the body, kind of what the qualities of that experience are like, and then see what happens. Let's see, online tools. Yes, there are a lot of online tools. I honestly can't make specific recommendations because I just don't use them. I have a lot of people that say they really like the Calm app. I think that's a fee for service though. I am happy, Jan, if people would like, I'm happy to share a couple of MP3 files of recordings that you could then distribute if you'd like to.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Let's see, best time of day to practice mindfulness. Oh, that's a great question too. So it really depends on your rhythms. Some people find first thing in the morning is traditionally an early morning practice, kind of before the world wakes up and everything starts getting stirred. But some people really find it's a nice midday kind of reset. And sometimes right before bed can be really nice. So what's a really fun exploration, Madeline, is to see what suits your system best and to see what suits your system best on given days, kind of given what you're working with, because that might vary from time to time. I'm hoping, Jan, people can hear me because I didn't hit the answer live button. Are people hearing me?
I can hear you. Raise your
hope-
hand, somebody. Can you do the raise your hand if you can hear Kimberly?
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Right.
I was getting ready to be a techno doofus here for a moment. Okay, so of the different practices, are you calling the body scan loving kindness? No. So body scan and loving kindness are two distinct practices. Thank you for asking that question. But there is a particular quality of kindness that we practice in the body scan. So we're not going into a practice of judging the experiences in the body, but rather sensing them as they are. Seems to be a good technique to help people relax before sleep. Yeah, it really, body scan. People, I've had people honestly over the years describe that they've healed their insomnia with body scan. It can be a really nice kind of entree into sleep. And here's Ken. Yes, so Ken, to clarify, are you saying being aware of aches and pains by extending loving kindness, we can become more accepting of body problems? Yes, Ken, that's great. That's a beautiful word. It really is a process of acceptance. And so acceptance has a certain receptivity kind of built in the mindfulness training. The way we define acceptance is the willingness to have the experience that we're having, because in this moment, it's what is here. It's the truth of things, right? So it's absolutely a process, a dynamic process of acceptance. And there's also different neurological changes that happen when we are present with sensations in a non-judgmental way. And we've seen this again in our research trials with pain in particular, as well as cancer, but that it shifts how the nervous system is processing those signals. Okay, so it's partly it's an acceptance, but it also has a physiologic signature as well. Good question. Thank you. All right. Anything else you guys would like to speak to?
I think we're running short on time, and I promised everybody 2:00. So Kimberly, I just want to say thank you so much. This was absolutely beautiful, amazing. I feel better after that hour, so thank you for the boost I'll get for the afternoon. There's so few individuals that do mindfulness training specifically for PD, and I'm just so thrilled that you're here. And I hope it opens some doors to awareness and opportunities to feel better. So thank you again. We really appreciate you. And once again, everybody will be sending out these slides and the information that Kimberly's going to forward at the conclusion of all 4 series. So at the end of the month, you'll get a little bulk package, and we hope you enjoy. And thank you all for coming today. And we hope to see you next week. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thank you guys for coming.
Bye-bye.